righty, guys. Mark has given us the thumbs up, so we'll go ahead and get started with our class. Let everybody grab a seat. Good to see everybody here this morning. We have officially set the clocks back. It's hard to believe it's that time of the year. I love it, though. I need to let me see who I can ball and told to come up here. Hey, come here, Bobby. I'm going to use you for something real quick. Spencer Furby was here years ago, and I remember him using this example in a gospel meeting as it related to eternity. You've probably seen it before, but I'm going to use it. So if you've seen it and you're burnt out on the example, I apologize. Just humor me. But I want us to really start thinking about eternity as we continue in our study of Ecclesiastes. You know, as the teacher of this class, you know, I'm forced to do a lot more self-reflection than most of you. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. That might not be a fair statement. But I spent a lot of time yesterday in the book of Ecclesiastes, and whenever you study God's Word, I think it really makes you take a long, hard look at your life. It should. I asked the question last week, if God were to audit you on your use of your time and your resources, how would you fare on that audit? If God were to come back today and say, Wes, you know, I've given you all these blessings. I've given you all these resources. Tell me, my son, what have you done with those? How have you used your time? I hope you're thinking about that right now. I hope you're thinking very deeply about your own life. I hope you take a long, hard look at your life and really ask some of those questions. I say this with love. It's not my intention to upset anybody. It's certainly not my intention to offend anybody. And I can say this because I think I struggle with it to an extent. But I really think we're too comfortable. I think that we have become very, very comfortable. We've never faced persecution here in the church in the United States. And I'm certainly not asking for persecution, but I can only speak for myself. It really makes me wonder how much more on fire I would be for the Lord, James, if I faced the kind of persecution that my friends in other parts of the world are facing right now. So again, I ask these questions not to step on toes, not to upset anybody. I ask them out of love because I want to see all of us in heaven one day. And I think we need to ask these hard questions. We need to be in the business of really reflecting on our lives and looking at ourselves in the mirror. You know, are there areas that we need to improve in? Are we really, really living for the Lord? Or are we just satisfied with, well, I'm a good person? You know, if we're Christians, being good, that's expected. But sometimes, maybe I spend a little too much time thinking and reflecting. But yesterday, you know, it just kind of I got hung up on this. Man, are we too comfortable, Greg? And I'm not looking for you to answer, but Greg's just sitting right there but sometimes I wonder if I'm too comfortable. I've got all these blessings. God has blessed me with a nice home. God has given me the ability to get an education, which in turn has given me the ability to get a job, to have income in the bank, to provide for my family. I've got cars, I've got food. But what am I really, really doing to share that with other people? How am I using that to take the gospel into the rest of the world? Am I just hoarding it for myself? I'm going to get to my lesson in a minute, but this is just kind of some opening statements to kind of let you know where my mind is going. I think we're too comfortable. I love you, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm looking you and I, Batzel, you and I have known each other a long time. I think we're too comfortable. I think as Christians in the United States, we become lazy and we become complacent. And I pray that God will give us more time to make up for that. Getting back to my example, Spencer Furby, maybe 2014. Bobby, what I'm going to do, I'll get you to come out here, brother. If you can see this, the idea is that represents our life here on earth. Okay, so keep that in mind. And this right here is supposed to represent eternity. So just pretend with me for a moment. So Bobby, I want you to take this and just, walk with it to that exit sign and stop. Again, this is my life here on earth. What I do with this little bit of time right here is going to determine the rest of that. That's your life, Alex. That's time here on earth. Sometimes, thank you, Bobby. You don't have to worry about doing that. I'll clean it up. It's my mess. Sometimes I'm concerned that I have missed the boat, so to speak. Sometimes I'm concerned that I have that backwards. My priorities, my time, my resources. Yeah, I'm going to take care of my family. That's, again, as a Christian, that's expected. Yes, I'm going to provide for my kids. But again, back to my question, it's really a head scratcher for me if God said, Wes, look, son, I've given you all these blessings. What have you really done? I don't think God's going to be pleased with me, Greg, if I sit there and tell him, I've been a good person. I go to work every day. I pay my bills. I think God expects a lot more of us. And again, when I say we've become complacent and we become lazy, James, I'm talking to myself. Don't think I'm pointing the fingers. I'm not. I think I've got to step my game up. I've got to get my priorities in order. You may be sitting there today and you may think you're young and you've got your whole life to get things in order. I hope you do. I hope you live a long life. But I'm going to tell you, Katrina, just yesterday it seems like I was 23 years old. And I'll be 47 in May. It goes by quick. Today is the day to really get those priorities in order. Chapter 7, verse 13. Solomon has this to say, "Consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked?" Sometimes I am guilty of reading over Scripture, and I read a word like consider, and I don't think a thing of it. When was the last time that we have really sat down and truly, truly practiced this lost art of considering? You know what it means to consider something? It means to give careful thought. Don't think I'm elevating myself because I'm a sinner. But yesterday, I would like to think that that's what I was trying to do, was to really give careful thought to what God's Word says. I was trying to give careful thought to trying to really understand what Solomon left for us. He says, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? You know, the idea here is that God is the one that sets the standards. There are some things that are bent and are meant to be bent. Premarital sex is premarital sex. It was a sin in Solomon's time. It's a sin today. In spite of what society says, in spite of what all the critics say about, well, the Bible, it's just not relevant anymore. It doesn't fit the culture. It doesn't fit the times. No, it does. The Bible is still just as relevant today as it always has been. You know, in Solomon's example, you know, again, we're looking at the wise man versus the foolish man. We're trying to get wisdom. You know, Solomon's basically saying, look, man's always trying to inflate his own worth, his own intellect, trying to change God's word. Well, you know, I don't think what God says here really fits us anymore, so we're going to keep this part and we're going to leave this other part out. That's really what's happening, unfortunately, too many times in the world today. We want to pick and choose the things that we want to follow, and that which we don't want to follow, we just we shove it to the side. But Solomon, I think, here is really challenging us to give careful thought to the work of God. Verse 14, and this is where I really kind of got into that zone yesterday. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. But in the day of adversity, consider. There's that word again, consider. Man, I tell you, that word, consider. Given careful thought. Surely God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that man can find out nothing that will come after him. And Mike, brother, I don't know that I'm gonna really be able to clear this up. But I'm going to give it a good old West Basham try, and we all know what that's going to result in. But verse 14, in the day of prosperity, be joyful. When times are good, be joyful. You know, James, if you're having a good day, man, be thankful for that day. Don't be beating yourself up. If you're having a great day, if you're enjoying prosperity, if times are good, be thankful. Enjoy those good days. You know, sometimes I think some of us, we feel guilty. We look at the world around us and we see that there's some people that, man, they just don't seem to have any good days, Bill. And then when we have good days, we tend to feel guilty. I don't know that that's what God really wants us to do here, and I'll explain that as we go along. But Solomon says, in the day of prosperity, be joyful. And he also says there in the next verse, but in the day of adversity, consider. Now, I've got your attention because adversity, man, it happens to all of us, and much to our dismay at times, Woody, it happens too much, doesn't it? And I'm not looking for, you're sitting on the back and you're my friend, so I feel like I can call you out. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. This idea of contemplating. Now, I can't speak for everybody here, but I can speak for Wes. I don't like adversity when it comes into my life, James, but I'll tell you this. When I do have adversity in my life, it makes me think. It makes me really think soberly about my life and my relationship with God. It's very painful. Sometimes it can cause a little depression, a lot of feelings that we struggle with. But I think it's in those times of adversity, friends, that our faith begins to grow. We become stronger as Christians, don't we, Bill? If I never had adversity in my life, I'm fearful that I would become an apathetic, slothful, lazy child of God, and I don't want to do that. I do not want to be that. The more and more prosperity I have in my life, I need to be joyful. I need to count my blessings. I need to recognize that they're from God, that it's nothing that I have done. I'm so thankful that God has blessed me with a godly woman that's by my side, that has helped me with raising a family. I'm thankful that I have the material blessings that I have, and that I have the income that I have. But what do I do with that? Do I share? To whom much has been given, much is to be expected. And that's not always getting the credit card out or the checkbook out. It also has to do with your time, brothers and sisters. I'm going to digress a little bit, and again, I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not trying to. I'm a peacemaker, but I got to put it out there, and I got to speak the truth, and I got to be real. I think there's a lot of room for self-improvement when it comes to what we really do with our time. We give a lot of ourselves to a lot of good causes. And sometimes we give that much to God. Prosperity and adversity, man, you're talking two extremes. Adversity is what I think has continued to help me to grow in my faith. It's tough. What do you do in times of adversity? Who do you go to? Who do you rely upon? I think it's there in those times that we need to really be on our knees in prayer. We need to be forging relationships with our brothers and sisters. When you hurt, I hurt. When you rejoice, I rejoice. Solomon says here, surely God has appointed the one as well as the other so that man can find nothing that will come after him. Mike, I'm just taking a stab at this, and I just don't know, and this might be a study that I'll have to continue to embark on, but if I had a blueprint for my life and I knew what my future held, I don't know that I would have any trust in God. I don't know that I would put my faith and confidence in Him. Of course, we know that that's not the way God works. We have to live by faith. I have no idea what tomorrow holds. I have my own ideas, this is kind of what I'd like to see happen. Go to work, have a good day, everybody get along, everybody do what they're supposed to do. Everybody get up at the same time in the morning, fix their breakfast. We all have this ideal world. And then there's reality. And then life it happens. You know what I mean? It just happens. I guess this is just part of God's design, Mike. I think God knows that West Basham, if God told West Basham everything that was going to happen, I'm already a sinner. I'm already prone to be slothful, lazy, apathetic. If I knew everything, I don't know. Be honest with you, I'm glad I don't know everything. I don't want to know everything. I don't know what my future holds, but I do know who's in control and who holds my future. And no matter what, if I remain faithful, if I trust, if I put my confidence in God, it doesn't mean that I'm not necessarily going to like the results of what may or may not happen tomorrow, but I know I'm going to be okay. I know that God is going to take care of me. And that's, bottom line, that's the most important. Probably didn't do any justice to that question, but I'm sorry, but I tried. Verse 15. I have seen everything in my days of vanity. Man, verse 15 is a real head scratcher. There's a just man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Y'all don't know anybody in the world that fits that, do you? There are some things that are just, and that's part of the study here of Ecclesiastes. And I'm kind of jumping ahead. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that's part of wisdom. Is there's some things that, you know what, we're just never going to know. There's some things, Paul, that we're just not ever going to understand why it is the way it is on this side of eternity. But I think the struggle for some of us sometimes is we're so bent on trying to understand what's happening on this side of eternity instead of keeping our mind and our eyes focused on the other side of eternity. Anybody remember the story of Lazarus? Lazarus was a righteous man, right? Poor but righteous. And from what I remember, Bill, Lazarus, he had a tough life on this earth, didn't he? A rough life. Man, that's, and we have a lot of Lazarus in this world today among the brotherhood, don't we? Think about people in your life that you have known, that they are an upstanding, God-fearing, faithful child of God, but it just seems like they can't catch a break. That is puzzling to me. I struggle with that. It doesn't make sense, does it? And then on the flip side of that, you've got a wicked man, a person that is just oblivious to sin, who evil, and you just see them benefit. And there's sometimes I'm just like, man, I don't understand that. I don't have the answers for that, James. Maybe if I live to be 57, maybe I'll have the answer. I don't know. But I know right now at the age of 46, you know, I'm not really much of a man, or I'm trying to be better, trying to improve. I just don't have the answers for that. It doesn't make sense to me, Alex.
That's what he's saying right there. You can't straighten what God's made crooked. Like he's answering that as the verses before.
Say that again.
It's answering that in the verses before. You can't straighten what God has made crooked. It's not for us to try to even, don't even bother trying to figure it out.
You'll go crazy trying to figure it out.
So you're questioning God, Wes. That's what it sounds like to me.
Not me. Not me. You know, on your own time, you know, go check out the story of, is it Naboth or Naboth? Go to 1 Kings 21:13. Read about that righteous man. Look at what happened to him. If you're over there in the Old Testament, go check out the story of Jezebel. Evil, but seemed to prosper in this life. Go over to the heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, 32, 38. Read about what some of those men experienced. Good, God-fearing, righteous men. You know, transitioning into verse 16, talking about wisdom, folly. Haven't defined folly in a while. Folly, it's just lacking common sense, lacking good sense, foolishness. I don't hear the term foolishness thrown around a lot in society, James. And I've heard, and we've actually told our own kids not to say this word, but I'm going to say it just for class purposes. Stupid. That's folly. We don't call people stupid, but your choices and your behavior, that's foolish. That's stupid. That's folly. Solomon talks a lot about folly. He also is trying to present this idea to us that balance is the key. And we're going to see that here in these next few verses. Verse 16, do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you grasp this, and also not remove your hand from the other. For he who fears God will escape them all. I think the big takeaway I had from this yesterday, Alex, is that last part right there. If I fear God, I think I can avoid becoming overly righteous, overly wise, overly wicked. You know, what does that stuff mean? Let's kind of break it down just a little bit. You know, when you first read this, you're like, how is it possible to be overly righteous? I think the idea here, and you know, you may have a comment, you may not, but I will never be good enough. I will never be like Christ. What I can do is I can strive to be the very best that I can, to be as much like Jesus Christ as I can be. But I think I will run myself in the ground emotionally and mentally if I try to reach a level that I'm just not capable of reaching as a mere man. I think that's the idea. Brother T.
Two things. One, I think maybe he's saying here that we should not present ourselves as appearing to be overly righteous. That was to that thought.
Yep.
And back to another thought you had. When you had that timeline up, it made me think about something I saw the other day. If someone handed you an envelope that had your time of death in it, would you open it?
I'd shred it.
You'd shred it?
I wouldn't want to know.
I wouldn't want to know either, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I like questions like that. But yeah, I'd shred mine. I don't want to know. But I like T's comment. Not being overly righteous. I think we've always got to be aware of what our presentation is like to others. I sure hope that I don't ever come across as being haughty, as being a know-it-all, as being arrogant. I think that's the idea here. You know, I want to strive to be like Christ, not to be self-righteous or having this inflated view of my own goodness, my own worth. Now, what's our presentation? How do we come across to people? Whenever people interact with us and they walk away from that conversation, what are they left feeling like? How do they view us? How do they perceive us? I think that's kind of the idea I'm getting at. or Solomon's getting at. Woody, was Becky going to say something, or are you going to say something?
I'm going to say something first, and then Becky's going to have a point to make as well. Going back to verses 14, the way I understand it is he's basically summarizing his point from the first verse all the way down as these wise teachings that he's delivering there. And he says, look at what God has made. And from that phrase, just consider those words. Look at what God has made. And then we think, well, if we follow God, everything's going to be great. We're going to have a very generous lifestyle, and everything's going to be that gospel where everything goes our way, right? But we live in the world that's fallen, that's rejected God. So if you think about it, what should we really expect? What should we really think? And then how do we apply these wise teachings? And then what do we think of the outcomes? What are we going to expect as outcomes? Are you truly going to be expecting everything to go your way if you're living in a world that's rejected God? And then be a follower of God. And then I think as he transitions to 15, he basically talks about that very thing.
Brother Mike.
I think whether we look at verse 16 the way you presented it or the way T looked at it, I think the point is we're putting emphasis on other things besides God.
Yeah. Putting emphasis on other things besides God. I mean, that I agree with Mike. I agree with T. Both very wise men, very solid points. Solomon also warns against being overly wise. Is that possible? I guess it is. If Solomon said it, he warned against it. You know, I was reading this yesterday. I was like, well, man, being overly righteous, is it possible? Is it possible to be overly wise? Well, we've got Proverbs that says, do not make yourself overly wise. Proverbs 3 verse 7 says, do not be wise in your own eyes. Again, I think I could make myself miserable by trying to reach a certain standard that as a mere human, I just can't reach. Now, I can strive to reach it. I want to strive to be as much like Christ as I can. I want to be as good as I can. But there's a certain level that it's just beyond me. And I guess that's what Solomon was getting at. Or in my study, that's what I think he was getting at.
Kind of, when I think over righteous, I think of like the Pharisees, and really all they were doing was checking a box. It really was no longer a matter of the heart, but a matter of following a set standard. And I think that's when you take the heart out of the matter and you're looking at just checking these boxes so that you can appear to be, you know, one way, but on the inside you're something else.
Yeah.
I think that's where a disconnect comes in.
You know, I love the story of the Pharisee and the publican. And I think that's what kind of comes to my mind here as we talk about being overly righteous, overly wise. Is, yes, we should strive for wisdom and knowledge, but if we don't have humility, I don't think we have anything. I can know a lot, but if I don't have humility, you're not going to listen to anything, or you shouldn't listen to anything I have to say. Now, you know, when we talk about humility, we're not talking about being weak or, you know, that kind of stuff, but it's just it's a meekness. It's confidence under control. You know a lot, but you don't have to broadcast it, you know. Humility is a wonderful trait for us to aspire to have as Christians, and I think that we should all aspire to have that trait. Humility. Last part of verse 18, and I'm going to kind of speed up because I want to get to a couple of verses that really piqued my interest yesterday. Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time? That verse is not suggesting that evilness and moderation is ever okay. I mean, I think we got to get that out there really quick. I think the idea here is that we should never, as Christians, take sin lightly. Here's a good example of that. Boys will be boys. How would you like it if I told Carson and Ethan, well, y'all just going to be boys, just go do what you're going to do? But I think sometimes we have a tendency to categorize sin. Well, this sin is way up here, and this sin's right here, and this sin's down here. Sin is sin, and we need to avoid it at all costs. When we become aware of it, we need to repent. We need to help other people with sin. Again, I can't go to a brother or sister with an over-righteous, over-wise demeanor and expect to have a conversation with them about their sin. I need to do it in a very loving way. I need to do it with humility. I need to have a relationship with people. I think we've lost the art of relationships a lot of times. We don't have relationships with one another. Yeah, we have four-year talk. Do we really have relationships with one another? Do you really know what I struggle with? You know I take medication for anxiety because I told you last Sunday. I'm not saying that everybody has to be as open and air out their dirty laundry like I do, but you know what? As Christians, do we really have relationships with one another? I'll say this with love. I don't think we do.
Why do you think that is?
I got a lot of answers for that, Mike. I think sometimes we're scared. I think sometimes it's the culture that we've grown up in here in the United States. I think it has to do with cultural expectations, and that should not always creep into the church, but I think it does. I think it has to do with our upbringings. I've got a lot of reasons. I think a lot of times, I can't say that this is the case with everybody, Mike, but I think some of us are scared to death of being judged. I think some of us are scared to death of being judged. If people really knew what we struggle with. But you know the problem I have with that is, what is Christianity about if we can't share our deepest struggles, our deepest hang-ups, have we completely missed the boat? I don't think you would think less of me if trust me, if you really want to know what I struggle with, come talk to me. And you better have some time on your hands.
I think it's everybody. I know Wes on Sunday morning. We don't think anybody else has the same struggles we have, or the same temptations, or whatever the issue. And we don't want to let other people know that, because we're the only ones that have that issue.
We fear that we're going to be perceived as weak. We're scared to death of being judged. Let's face it, that's a lot of it. We're scared of what people are going to think.
I think another factor is that for those of us that are still working full time, we're stuck on that wheel. You know, you climb on it every day. I get off and get a little reprieve. I get some sleep and get up and get back on that wheel again. And I think that takes a large portion of our focus. So that, and I'm not making excuses, but your wheel's not where my wheel is.
Yeah.
You know, we don't run the same circle. Our maze ain't got the same cheese at the end of it.
I agree with Woody. And then you also know what comes to my mind, and I want you to hear me on this. We make time for things that we really want to make time for. I guarantee you, if you're a sports fanatic and I gave you some tickets, you're going to show up to that game before that game starts. And you know the rest of the story.
We're uncomfortable with not knowing how to fix someone. If I'm speaking with someone who's grieving, you know, naturally, our natural tendency is we want to fix them. We want to make them feel better. And we don't know how to do that. And so we really don't want to know. You know, we really don't want to know if you're hurting, because then I feel an obligation to have to fix you. Well, that's not what Christianity is about. We're not supposed to fix each other. We're supposed to, you know, rejoice, hurt when the other person is hurting, and then, yes, help each one to strive to overcome that sin.
Paul was going to make a comment.
So I guess I'm like you, Wes. I have a lot of issues, and I know about them. I don't share them. I think some people can figure it out what my issues are. I have a different approach than Katrina. I think a lot of people, and I think I'm kind of this way too, I've overcome a lot of adversity in my life. And for me to listen to somebody, which I do, is my job and yours as well, and I listen to the problems that people tell me. And I'm thinking the problem is you, the way you think, all right? And I'm going to give you a solution. Of course, that's kind of what Katrina was saying. But no matter what you give these people, no matter what resource, no matter how you direct them, they're not going to listen. They're not going to do it. And so sometimes when I identify people like that, I don't want to hear what they have to say because you're not going to do anything about it. And that irritates me, all right? You're going to complain, and then you're not going to do anything about it. I don't want to be around you because I don't want people are going to treat me the same way. If I'm not going to fix the problem or at least attempt to fix the problem, they don't want to hear about the problem. And I think that's where a lot of Americans are. And then the other thing is that a lot of Americans just don't want to know. They don't want the appearance of being weak. And so therefore they don't take the time. But we're all weak. We all have issues. We all have problems. And we're not mature enough to identify that.
Well said.
This is something that I've thought of for a long time because I know I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're saying today. But I think a lot of us have walls of defense. It's just hard to let people in. I think it's just a defensive mechanism, you know, to protect our feelings. We just feel like we're having to be on guard all the time, you know, for fear of disappointment or, you know, fear of being a burden on someone else, fear of judgment. Everything you said has hit home. I think some of it's just protective instinct. People are thinking, why let someone in? They're not going to be there for me anyway, you know, or they're going to run off. So
I think what we're all hearing
Yeah.
today is we've all got struggles, we've all got issues.
Wes, I think this goes back to the first section where he talks about the opposites of the oppositions. You know, the good times and the adversity. And going to that, I think of all of the things that Paul was saying and Katrina was saying. Physically, Wes, what makes you stronger?
Kettlebell swings, burpees.
And what is that? What kind of adversity is that?
I don't like it while I'm doing it, but I like the after effects.
Right. It's that resistance makes us stronger. If you apathetically cruise through life, what would your physical body be like?
I don't want to think of it.
It'd be like some kind of jelly.
Yeah.
You'd be weak and atrophied.
Doughboy.
Yeah, Pillsbury. So much of our life, we have to expose ourselves so that we can work through the adversity. And I think another thing that Solomon's talking about, not seeking wisdom, in another part, he talks specifically about wasting your life seeking wisdom. Because you can. Some people have abnormal amounts of wisdom. And it makes me think of JFK made a comment, for those who are history buffs. He had a big meeting, had a lot of people in the Oval Office, and he made a comment about, we've gathered the greatest amount of intelligence in the office since Thomas Jefferson was in here by himself. And if you know history, Thomas Jefferson by the age of 35 had done amazing things. It was a gift of God. He didn't do that on his own. If you've been blessed with an abnormal amount of intelligence, to use it, that's a good thing. If you're not, I'm not trying to say stay in your lane, but sometimes it's best to use the gifts God gave us and glorify Him with them. So those are my points for the morning.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you everybody for your comments, your attention. We're going to have to go ahead and stop right here. We'll pick up with this next week. That's what I did with them women 2 weeks ago.